Welcome to the Pastry Arts Virtual Summit. My name is Tina Tweedy. Over the past 20 years, I've been a pastry chef, a culinary arts instructor, a chocolatier, and a business owner. All the while raising a family and watching my children grow into wonderful young adults. I think all of my kids would tell you I'm a nature lover. Many of our sweetest memories were those we spent outside, hiking, exploring the forest, and planting in the garden. All of those joyful moments inspired my culinary creations over the years and continue to inspire me today. I am so delighted to share a bit of joy with you today as I demonstrate how you can bring some of the beauty and essence of nature and your own garden into a tiny, sweet treat. Every time I walk outside, I feel like there is a little bit of magic just waiting to be discovered. All you really have to do is pay attention, and you'll begin to see exceptional glimpses of beauty and detailed intricacies all around you. Much of this beauty is fleeting. A glorious sunrise, a tiny butterfly floating onto your hand, or the lovely shape of a morning glory, opening only once and lasting just a single day. I often find myself trying to snap a picture of these little gifts, yet all too often, the moment passes before I can truly capture it. I've learned that I need to just be, to just savor in the moment, the magic, and the blessing that is the natural world. And then, my challenge is to find a way to translate nature's beautiful essence into something that I can share, something that will bring joy to others and hopefully spark a memory of friendship and togetherness. I'll be showing you how to make two sweet treats today. One beautifully simple, the other exquisitely intricate. The first is lavender shortbread. Every time I smell lavender, I remember walking through a Midwestern lavender field with my family. My children loved picking the flowers and watching all the tiny butterflies flying around them. They made their armfuls of flowers into tiny bouquets for family and friends. The second is the violet cordial. Spring violets are one of the very first wildflowers to appear on the forest floor. And as a beekeeper, I've always liked to think that if bees dream over the winter, they're dreaming of violets. The liquid center of the cordial is what I dream a violet's nectar tastes like. No wonder bees like them so much. So let's get started with this lavender shortbread. Shortbread is a classic cookie that is a perfect base for anything that you want to mix into it and really highlight. This base recipe was given to me by a friend over 10 years ago. It was such a simple recipe, and I just loved the buttery richness of it. In my friend's recipe that she hand wrote on a card, it just said to put all the ingredients into a bowl and then mush it all together. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with 2 cups or 10 ounces of all-purpose flour. To that, we'll add 3/4 of a cup or 6 ounces of granulated sugar. Let's mix that up just a little bit. Then we'll add in 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 egg yolk, and I want to whisk that up a little bit with my fork. This is just going to help all of that shortbread bind together. Then we have 8 ounces of unsalted butter. It's cold and I have mine cubed. That will help it to mix in a little bit better. And last but not least, this beautiful lavender. Some people are worried about putting lavender into desserts because they think it might make it a little too perfumey or soapy, but that is not the case with this shortbread at all. This is just the right amount to give a subtle herbal, floral taste to the lavender, and that butter is just providing a nice richness and a balance with that herbal taste. So before we put it in, we're going to put it into the palm of our hand and crush it up. Now this is dried culinary lavender, which you can buy at specialty shops. You can also use fresh lavender from your garden. If you're using fresh, you want to use double the amount of the dried. So in this case, you would use 2 tablespoons instead of 1. So that's nice and crushed. Sprinkle it in. Now in my friend's recipe, she said to have it all in there and mush it all together. So that's what we're going to do. Let's mush. I like to coat each of the cubes of butter with a little bit of that flour. And then I take my fingertips and smush the butter together like this. It's the same technique I use when I'm making scones. It helps make the scones nice and fluffy, and it's going to do that with the shortbread too. It's going to give them kind of that short texture or a little bit of a layered texture. Just keep smushing up that lavender and the butter. The smell just reminds me of those days in the fields with my children. They loved making shortbread. It was always so fun to have them just sit right on the counter. They could dig their hands right in, sprinkle in the lavender. They love mushing up the butter. Anytime the flour would get onto the counter, we always called it a flour shower. So much fun. All right, once that's all mushed together, we're going to put it into an 8x8 pan. You want to line it with parchment paper. And just pour it on in. And then pat it down. Perfect. Then we'll take a fork and we'll give it a few pokes. Then we're going to put it into the oven at 375 for about 15 to 20 minutes. While the shortbread is baking, we're going to make a pretty little garnish that we can put on a tiny little piece of shortbread that will be perfect for an afternoon tea or giving your shortbread as a gift. We're going to make some lovely little rice paper butterflies. These little butterflies are available online. They're made with wafer paper or rice paper, and they're printed with edible ink. I like to purchase these at a place called Fancy Flowers, but they're also available at different cake decorating shops and specialty stores. They come like this, and you could use them just like that, but I like to give them a little bit more life. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bit of piping gel and put it onto your paintbrush and then just gently brush it onto the wing. What this does is it gives a little bit of glisten to the wing. It also gives just a little bit of texture, like veining, so it makes the butterfly look more lifelike. Then we give it a slight fold. Then we're going to take a piping bag with a little bit of tempered chocolate and very carefully just pipe on a little the body. Perfect. You could just leave it right on the sheet pan, but I like to set mine into an egg holder. You could just use a paper egg carton if you like, but that helps keep the shape of the wings, and then the chocolate can set up and the wings can dry. Once they're all dry and the shortbread is done, I'll show you how to garnish them. Okay, the kitchen is filled with the aroma of lavender. That's how I know our shortbread is just about finished. let's take a look at the oven. It's ready to go. So we're going to take it out of the oven. And while it's still hot, we're going to score it. That will make it much easier to cut once it's completely cooled. So we'll take a bench scraper, and that's going to give us nice straight lines. It's the easiest way to cut it. We're going to go right down the middle. And then I'm going to do each half into thirds. So we'll cut this one into thirds, just pressing straight through, and then this side into thirds. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Be careful, that pan is hot. Go right down the middle. And again, let's go into thirds. You could make long rectangles if you like, or much larger squares if you prefer, but I like a nice little square of shortbread. Now it's scored, and we're going to let it cool completely, and then we'll garnish it. Okay, the lavender shortbread is cooled, so we're ready to score it again and then give it that pretty little butterfly garnish. So we're going to use these little flaps of parchment paper that we used before when we lined it, and just lift our shortbread right out of the pan. Perfect. It's almost completely cut already just from that pre-scoring that we did. But we're going to take our bench scraper again and just go right through on the lines that we made. By cutting it in half and then into thirds on each side, that gives us 36 pieces from that 8x8 pan. So this shortbread is now just wonderful to give as gifts just the way it is, but we're going to dress it up a little bit so that it's ready for an afternoon tea or a really special little gift. So we have our wafer paper butterflies all ready to go. The chocolate is set. All right, so we are going to take a little spatula and grab some of these pieces of shortbread. I'm going to grab a little middle piece. We're going to do 3 pretty little pieces on our tray here. We've got a little bit more tempered chocolate. I'm going to put just a dot on top of each one, and that's going to give something for the butterfly to sit on, and it'll keep it there when we go to move it outside for our afternoon tea. I'm going to take our butterfly and set it right on the chocolate. Aren't those pretty? We've got that wonderful aroma of lavender, just reminding me of those days in the fields of picking the lavender and making bouquets with my children. And also all the butterflies that were flying around. These little edible rice paper butterflies are helping to bring back that memory of those just butterfly couples flitting and twirling around the fields. So let's take this out and we'll add it to our afternoon. I love the beautiful simplicity of our lavender shortbread, but I also love the detailed intricacy that goes into making these violet cordials. A chocolate cordial is a candy that has a chocolate shell on the outside and a liquid liqueur center. A sugar syrup is combined with the liqueur, and it just makes for such a sublime experience. My favorite cordials are the violet cordials because they remind me of the springtime bees. We're going to make a sugar syrup and then add in our liqueur. You can use any liqueur really, but my favorite is creme de violet. This liqueur is a brandy that is infused with Queen Charlotte and March violets. and it completely captures the essence of a violet, the fragrance, the taste, and what I think a violet nectar tastes like. And it's such a beautiful purple color, almost looks like amethyst. So let's get started. In my pot, I already have 13 ounces of granulated sugar and 4.5 ounces of water. You're going to want to stir that together and then take it to the stove, and we're going to cook it to 243 degrees. You'll want to stir the sugar and the water until they're completely dissolved, and then I like to put a lid on top. What that's going to do is prevent any crystallization from happening. You can brush down the sides of the pot with a pastry brush dipped in water, but I find that putting the lid on is very efficient because what happens is the steam that goes up hits the lid and then the water rushes down the sides. So once it's completely boiling, I can take the lid off and have sugar that's completely dissolved, boiling away and ready to go. So we're going to cook this sugar syrup to 243 degrees. Okay, now that the sugar is boiling and I can see all of the condensation running down the sides, I'm going to pull off that lid. And we're going to clip in a candy thermometer. And we want to cook this sugar syrup, to 243 degrees because creme de violet is a sweetened spirit. If you were using an unsweetened spirit, say like vodka or bourbon, you would want to cook your sugar to 246 because it doesn't have that extra sugar like a sweetened spirit does. I'm getting older, so I'm going to have to put on my glasses to see this little number here. Okay, so far we're just at 200. But right when it's at 243, we're going to pull the sugar off the heat and add in our liqueur. The temperature is important for a liqueur cordial because we want it to stay liquid inside the chocolate shell, yet we need it to crystallize just enough so that we can seal the chocolate shell. Okay, we've hit 243 degrees. I'm going to right away pour in our violet liqueur. It's best to have the liqueur warmed so as not to cool down your sugar syrup too quickly. I used some liqueur glasses just for fun. Stir it in gently. And then we're going to pour it into a separate bowl. You're going to want to take a hot towel and lay it right over the top of the bowl. What that does is prevent air from getting to it and causing premature crystallization. We don't want any air to touch it until we actually have it in the chocolate shells. When we put it into the chocolate shell, the little bit that will be touching the air is going to crystallize and give us just enough of a tension layer to seal the chocolate. We need to let this cool though to about 78 degrees before we can put it into the shells. If you add it to the shells too quickly, it'll melt the chocolate shell. So let's let that cool. Okay, our sugar syrup has cooled, so we're going to put it into a squeeze bottle and then add it into our chocolate shells. These are chocolate truffle shells. They come already prepared and they have a tiny little hole at the top. That's where we're going to put the sugar syrup. And then the air will get to the syrup in that little space and it'll crystallize into just a thin, thin little layer. And we'll come back tomorrow and seal it with chocolate. So let's put this beautiful purple syrup into the squeeze bottle. There we go. And now, very carefully, and you get the hang of it as you fill the truffle shells, but you have to put just the right amount to go right to the top. You'll find out quickly if your sugar syrup was too warm because the chocolate would melt. But if it's just right, it should flow in nicely and your shells will stay in the shape that they started as. I like to get a little closer so I can see that I'm getting it right to the top. If you feel like you squeeze in just a little too much, you can always suction it out with your squeeze bottle. So just keep going until they're completely filled. Then we'll leave this tray of truffle shells overnight, and tomorrow we'll seal them and finish the cordials. Okay, so we've let our cordials sit overnight, and the little round space that is exposed to air has that liqueur sugar syrup in there. It has started to, or it did crystallize. So it's got just the thinnest layer of crystals across the top. And so that's going to allow us to seal it with chocolate so that we have a complete chocolate shell around the liquid center. So I have some tempered chocolate in my little piping bag here. And I am just making sure to go all the way around the edge very gently to seal in the syrup. You want to make sure that you don't poke right down into the center because that crystallized layer is really thin and you could allow all of the liquid to come out. So I start on the edge, move around in a circle, and just kind of gently spread that chocolate into the hole. Making sure to seal it all in, and that way the rest of that sugar syrup is going to stay liquid on the inside. Then once we've sealed the top, then it's time to dip them. I have a bowl of tempered chocolate here to dip the cordials. Once they're dipped, I'm going to garnish them with a little bit of flowers. Now, if it's springtime and you're making violet cordials, the most appropriate thing to garnish them with would be a fresh violet that maybe you foraged in the forest. The wild violets are edible and just beautiful. You could also gather those in the springtime and crystallize them yourself, or you could purchase crystallized violets. That's what I like to garnish these with most of the time, but today, since I have some beautiful alyssum out in the garden, I'm going to garnish them with that. I think it looks like a little mini bouquet. So we'll put that on the top. I also brought in a little bit of fresh lavender. It is starting to bloom, so we're going to pull off some of those little purple flowers and garnish the cordials with that as well. Just make sure whatever flowers you put onto the cordial are edible. And I think any beautiful bloom will look appropriate with the violet cordial. You'll want to use a dipping fork. So take one of the cordials and just plop it into your tempered chocolate. Take it out with the dipping fork, tap lightly, and then set it onto your parchment paper, sliding that fork out from underneath. When you do this, you'll want to make sure that that flat side, the side that you sealed, is on the bottom. I like to slide it a little bit so that we don't have a foot underneath. You don't want to put your flour or garnish on right away. You want to wait until it's just starting to set up. So I can usually do about 3 or 4 before I start to garnish. Now we'll take our pretty little flower bouquet. I just have some culinary tweezers here, and we're going to garnish the top of those cordials. We'll put some of those pretty little purple lavender blossoms on one. And this one we'll do a little combination of both. Some of the sweet alyssum and some of the lavender. Oh. And these will dry on there nicely and just look so lovely. Okay, so once your chocolate has set up, you're ready to take it off the parchment paper and move it to a tray where they're all nice and cleaned up. So we've got our little trails of chocolate here. They should just pop right off. If there's a little bit that still sticks, you can use a knife to just remove that. Oh, that one's a little stuck, so we just carefully cut away there. Popped right off. Has a nice little foot. Just the bottom is flat. You don't want to have a big pool around the side. That's why I drug it just a little bit when it set on the parchment. Pull that off. Perfect. Now all of these pieces are still perfectly good chocolate. We're going to loosen them from the parchment paper, and then they can go right back into the bowl to be melted and retempered. The violet cordials are finished. They are ready to give as a gift or for another beautiful addition for our afternoon tea. So we're going to put a few of them on a plate. If you give these as a gift, or even if you're having them with a little tea with friends, it's very important to let your guests know that they are liquid on the inside. There is a special way to eat a cordial when it's liquid. If you don't let your guests know, they could end up with the purple amethyst colored liqueur all over the front of them. So to eat a cordial, I eat it in 2 bites. My husband likes to just pop the whole thing in his mouth, but I've always liked to see the inside of a chocolate. The cordial gets these pretty tiny little crystals around the inside that do look like little amethysts. So I like to eat it in 2 bites. But if you're going to do that, you have to be ready for the liquid on the inside. So bite through and just tip your head back a little bit to catch the liquid. And a little sip. It's just violets. It's liquid on the inside. I want to pour it out so you can see it. Let's move these out of the way. Although I'd really love to finish this one. It's so delicious. It just reminds me of springtime and hikes in the woods. Oh, I'm almost crying. Okay, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Just the essence of violet. And you've got a pretty chocolate shell around the outside, pretty purple creme de violet liqueur middle, and a beautiful little bouquet on top. Just the beauty of nature captured right there on your plate. I'll finish this one. Love it. Thank you so much for visiting the Pastry Arts Virtual Summit and for spending time with me today. I hope you were inspired to go out into your garden and really appreciate the beauty of nature. Try to capture that in all of your moments, and especially in your sweet treats. My daughter and granddaughter are on their way, so I've got our special lavender shortbread and the violet cordials all set up with her favorite tea set. So I'm headed out for tea. Have a wonderful day.